Mother Shipton was reputedly born in the cave next to the dropping well at Knaresborough in 1488. She was born Ursula Sontiel, and supposed to be the daughter of Agatha Sontiel, who had a liaison with the devil. The devil gave her powers to see into the future and to foretell many happenings which have since come to pass. She married a man called Toby Shipton at the age of 24 and went to live near York, and after that time didn't live in Knaresborough anymore. She continued to do her prophesying, which was mainly done from the York area, and a lot of her prophecies were about York. The dropping well was first put on exhibition in 1630, but my family became involved very much later, at the turn of the century, in about 1897. In 1915, my great-grandfather bought the dropping well and the Mother Shipton Inn when it came up for sale. It had previously been in the ownership for hundreds of years of the Slingsby family, who were forced to sell it to meet the costs of a court case. He then continued to open more of the estate, which we now call it, to the public, so that today it stretches for about 3/4 of a mile along the banks of the River Nid. It has been run successively by various members of the family, and I have been running it for the last 13 years. The dropping well, otherwise known as the petrifying well, turns things to stone in periods varying from 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on the density of the object which is hung. Normally we have about 34 objects hanging at any one time, and they are anything that's porous, from a glove to a baby's first booty, right to stuffed animals and great teddy bears. The teddy bears get terribly heavy and can weigh 100 weight when eventually they're turned to stone. The objects have to be wired with copper because other kinds of metal corrode and collapse. We're always pleased to have anything left by visitors that's porous. We usually rely on the homemade soft toys, left sometimes rather reluctantly by children. And if we haven't already got dozens of the same object, we'll use it. Otherwise, I'm afraid there'd be rows and rows of socks and pieces of knitting. The water flow over the face is constant, doesn't vary summer or winter, although of course the dropping well freezes in winter and is a very beautiful sight with hundreds and hundreds of icicles forming, but the water still continues to come and rise out of the ground. The water that turns objects to stone in the dropping well has up to 40 elements. The main things are iron, sulphur, magnesium and lime, although those things just on their own in combination wouldn't work the magic of the dropping well.
My grandfather's clock was too tall for the shelf, so it stood 90 years on the floor. It was taller by half than the old man himself, though it weighed not a pennyweight more. It was bought on the dawn of the day that he was born, and was always his treasure and pride. But it stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. 90 years without slumbering, tick-tock, tick-tock, its life seconds numbering, tick-tock, tick-tock, it stopped short, never to go again, when the old man died. In watching his pendulum swing to and fro, many hours that he spent while a boy. For in childhood and manhood the clock seemed to know, and it shared all his grief and his joy. talking stopped, short, never to go again when the old man died. It stopped, short, never to go again when the old man died.
The Brontes came to Haworth in 1820. They came from Thornton near Bradford, and it is said that they came up the main street with 2 cartloads of furniture. Certainly there were 6 young children. They had the misfortune to lose their mother a year after arriving at Haworth, and ultimately they were brought up by an aunt who came from Penzance in Cornwall, Anne Bronte, their mother's sister. And Anne Bronte was instrumental in giving them both domestic experience and such education as a girl at that time would be able to obtain. Being motherless, they were left very much on their own resources, and to amuse themselves began to edit small magazines with little stories and little plays, poetry readings and all kinds of things. These tiny manuscripts are only half the size of a normal postcard, and they are actually on display in the famous Bonnell collection at the Haworth Parsonage Museum. These were to be the forerunner of more important literary works in elder life. At first, they were a little shy of having them published, and ultimately they made themselves nom de plumes with masculine names of Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell, and their publishers in London for some considerable time were unaware that they were anything else but men. When the Brontes began to write serious books, they did this in the dining room, which is on the left-hand side as one enters the Parsonage Museum. This room is preserved in the exact condition and with the same furniture as was there in the period of the Bronte residence. And the 3 girls used to walk round the table, talking, reciting, and reading extracts of their work to each other, partly as an exercise. The room on the right is known as the parlour, and was really the preserve of their father, who became very much of a recluse after the death of his wife. And it was through their loneliness that they became such comrades in doing so much writing. After the death of Aunt Branwell, Emily took over the management of the domestic arrangements, and in the small kitchen you can actually see the kitchen table on which she worked and the utensils which she used. The characters of the 3 Bronte sisters were varied. Emily was possibly the strongest and most dominant, while Charlotte was probably the more businesslike and steady. Anne, the younger, whose works are possibly not remembered as much as those of her 2 sisters, was of a quieter disposition, and this is reflected in the character of her writings, and particularly in the writing of several hymns.
Lest thou I was 12 years of age when I first came to work here, the 16th of January 1916. It was the war period, of course. I had a brother that worked here. He was a side back striker at the time, and of course he knew there was a vacancy here. Work in those days, as you can imagine, were very, very scarce. There was very little work about. If you got a job, you stick to it, whether you liked it or not. When I got home one night, I told the old man I didn't think I liked the job particularly, and he said, logically, that was the time. It didn't matter whether you liked the job or not. That was your job, and you were going to put up with it. When I first came here, we worked from 7 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening, 6 days a week, Saturday inclusive, for 3 shillings and 9 pence a week. There was about 22 people on the place. I was supposed to be going to be a scythe fitter and setter, but the job was so numerous. The only thing that you was not allowed to do was the scythe grinding. You could have nothing to do with the scythe grinding at all. The scythe grinder could bring a son and no one else. He had to be a son or he couldn't be employed here. Incidentally, of course, the scythe grinder is the only trade where the stone runs into the man. In any other grinding trade anywhere in the world, the stone runs away from the man. But to the scythe grinder it runs into him, which makes the job more dangerous, of course. The wheel was full, absolutely full of nothing but dried dust floating about. In fact, the Sheffield University used to send students up to photograph it. It was the basic cause of silicosis, the reason why the government outlawed sandstone and put them on the carborundum. But when they swallowed all this dirt, they used to come out to me with the 6-gallon bottle enclosed in wicker work. It was lifted into the basket. Go on, Frank. Beer, you know where to go. On the strap. Down to the Beachy Patel, which was the nearest. And if I fail there, down to the wagon and horses at mill houses. If I fail there, down to the millstone at mill houses. And if I fail there, across to the Robin Hood. And if I fail there, right up Little Common Lane to Ecclesall, to the Rising Sun. And believe you me, odd times and very odd times, I didn't get any beer. And if I didn't, I used to go home because it was more than my life was worth to come down without it. But normally I would pick up perhaps 4 or 5 gallon at the various places, and that was all right for the rest of the day. It didn't always work out that way. And it was not wise to come back if you came back without beer. In short water time, summertime, very often the place would be stood still because you hadn't the water to run with. The grinders could work because they had a steam engine installed simply for that job. The only people who couldn't work were the scythe fitters, who had to bore the backs by water wheel, and of course there was no water so they couldn't work. They was very well placed here at W. Torrickson's and Turner by having a forge here, a forge at Smithywood, and a forge at Little London on the same stretch of water. So in summertime, when the water was very low, the forgeman, any scythe forgeman, would come to work here about 4 o'clock in the morning. Run the dam down, he'd run it dry, walk down to Smithywood and catch the same water used here. And in the afternoon, do the same thing again at Little London, catch the same water down off at Smithywood. So he could work.
Abroad for pleasure as I was a-walking, it was one summer's evening clear. Abroad for pleasure as I was a-walking, it was one summer's evening clear. Oh, there I beheld a most beautiful damsel, lamenting for her shepherd dear, lamenting for her shepherd dear. The dearest evening that e'er I beheld thee, evermore the lass I adore. The dearest evening that e'er I beheld thee, evermore the lass I adore. Wilt thou go fight yon French and Spaniards? Wilt thou leave me thus, my dear? Wilt thou thou leave me thus, my dear. No more to yon green banks will I take thee, with pleasure for to rest thyself and view the lambs. No more to yon green banks will I take thee, with pleasure for to rest thyself and view the lambs. But I will take thee to yon green gardens, where the pretty flowers grow, where the pretty, pretty flowers grow. Abroad for pleasure as I was a-walking, it was one summer's evening clear. Abroad for pleasure as I was a-walking, it was one summer's evening clear. Oh, there I beheld a most beautiful damsel, lamenting for her shepherd dear, lamenting for her shepherd dear.
The history of Harry Ramsden's commenced in a small wooden hut at the junction of the Leeds-Bradford roads at Whitecross, Guiseley, on February the 10th, 1928. Mr. Ramsden was an astute businessman and a typical Yorkshireman. He was originally in fish and chips in the Bradford area, but always wanted to stretch further afield. He spent many hours studying the prospects at Whitecross, and at last decided this was the site for him. He started with this wooden hut with himself as a friar, and saw the crowds in those days. Of course, the tram cars turned around in that area. It was the longest ride on a tram car for threepence, so there was always a certain amount of crowds, and he saw the potential. In 1930, he started thinking of bigger things, and almost everybody thought he was mad. But I think the big thing with him, he saw the potential and development of the motor car. All traffic going to the west of the country, from Leeds and Bradford, with the exception of the Lawnswood route, had to pass by Whitecross. It was a favourite stepping stone to Ilkley, the Dales, Skipton, Otley, a thriving little market town just on the borders of the cafe. And this is where he thought he was going to get his customers from. He set off with very elaborate building, with stained glass windows, and the people in its development pulled up at the roadside and said, "Good God, what's this going to be, a Methodist church or a Sunday school?" And lo and behold, when they were told that it was going to be a fish and chip shop, they just gasped in amazement. Harry Ramsden's has always been famous for quality. From the day of 1920 when he opened, as far as price was concerned, it never came into his head. Only thing he insisted on was quality. In 1954, I took over the lease from the late Mr. Ramsden with an option to purchase at any time during the lease. And I arrived at Whitecross, stood across the road, and thought, well, what a lucky man I am. And I also felt very proud that I was the one that was going to follow in his footsteps. The first thing that amazed me was the fact that we had queues for fish and chips on a Sunday lunchtime. Well, this, of course, is so unusual to a Yorkshireman to see people queuing up for fish and chips. But lo and behold, this they seem to prefer even to the roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, for which the Yorkshire people are so famous. When we took over, there was a staff of 39, and we decided to improve it. We did this by such things as new gay tablecloths, features of special flowers, which we always insisted on had to be fresh. These were attended to every day. The second year we were there, we altered the colour schemes completely, and of course, most unusual for a fish and chip shop, we did fit it out with 12 bohemian cut glass chandeliers. And this created a great news item in the press, because it was the first time, I think, that ever cut glass had been used with fish and chips. We carried on, and within 3 years our staff had gone up to 70. And between the time of 1954, when we took it over, to 1970, when we sold out to Associated Fisheries, we're happy to say it did progress and progress up to a staff of 146. There are lots of interesting items in connection with Harry Ramsden's, and a glance at the visitors' book, which is always kept at the cashier, would see that practically every country in the world during some time in its history had made a visit to Harry Ramsden's. We've even had Russian scientists, we've had Russian agriculturists, and of course when they knew that the Russians were arriving at Harry Ramsden's, obviously they were surrounded by press and wondering what their opinion was of fish and chips, and needless to say it was very good. Harry Ramsden's today is known throughout the world, and although now it is 3 years since I retired, Harry Ramsden's will always be my baby. It gives me such a thrill to see the continuity of the business developing. It goes from strength to strength each year, and today is serving round about 1.5 million people a year.
Get the
varieties, seats in all parts, seats at all prices, seats in all parts. All-star bill tonight, all-star bill tonight.
Those sounds of the hansom cab and the commissionaire on the door must have been heard by people in the Leeds area for possibly well over 100 years, because the theatre itself, the City Varieties, is over 200 years old. In its present state, it is used for the Good Old Days programme, along with an old-time music hall which runs throughout the year. The building itself is full of historical interest. It is supposed to have connections with Kirkstall Abbey, which it must be about 5 or 6 miles away, and there are supposed to be tunnels, which no one's ever actually found, which run from the cellars of the theatre right through to the Abbey itself. And it's alleged that some of the monks used to make nightly trips backwards and forwards to see the show. How true that is, I don't know. But one thing is certainly true, and that is that royalty has visited the theatre. Edward VII visited the City Varieties, and that's the reason why you can see the coat of arms which is over the proscenium march. Many very famous artists have appeared at the City Varieties. I suppose some of them got their original start there, and Charlie Chaplin was one of these. At the time he was a member of a group called the 8 Lancashire Lads, and was not known in the capacity of the clown which he became, but purely as a clog dancer. And Harry Lauder also made one of his first appearances at the City Varieties in Leeds, and it was because of the success which he had there that he decided that he would become a professional entertainer and leave the pits in Scotland. There are many intriguing things about the theatre, not only the artists, but the people who come along to it, particularly to the television programme. And over the years, we have accumulated a waiting list of over 20,000 people who are all anxious to come and participate in the programme. And they provide their own costumes. There are various ways and means in which they do this. They either make them or they hire them. And in some cases there are quite a lot of authentic costumes lying around in boxes and trunks which grandmothers and granddads have willingly passed on to their children, and they turn up in these and they look absolutely magnificent. And sometimes when we're doing recordings, it's very incongruous to see a very modern car driving up the hedgerow and stopping, and out of it emerge 6 or 8 Edwardian characters. And I'm sure that anyone visiting Leeds for the first time and seeing this might wonder what on earth they were looking at, to see these people running up the hedgerow anxious to get into the theatre. We present the programme really as an authentic Edwardian programme. People come into the theatre dressed. They can go to the bars for an hour and drink if they wish. They then are entertained for about half an hour to a sing-song, and then we start the programme, and it goes through from start to finish with the chairman, Leonard Sachs, in exactly the same way as it would have done 150 years ago.
Time, ladies and gentlemen, to ask Miss Marjorie Manners to lead the company and yourselves in the last chorus for tonight, once again, Down at the Old Bull and Bush. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Marjorie Manners, the entire company, Mr. Bernard Herman, the entire and indefatigable orchestra. But this time, chiefly yourself.